Hey guys, I'm Hunter from Bronco Outdoors. Today I want to just take a minute to talk about why I believe my arrow setup was the best possible setup I could have had to take down my largest buck to date this past October. As I said, I shot my biggest buck to date on Halloween night about 2 weeks ago, and I was really glad I had a hard-hitting setup to make the shot. First I want to go over my bow setup. I'm shooting a 70-pound Athens Solace at 26-inch draw length, and pretty heavy draw weight bow, but I do lose some speed on the 26-inch draw length, and so to make up for that, I like to shoot a really heavy arrow so I can get the maximum penetration out of my setup. I'm shooting a 501 grain arrow with a 150 grain helix broadhead. It's a 2-blade broadhead, 150 grains, super strong, really penetrates well. It's a single bevel, so when it hits bone, it'll split it instead of having to just wedge right through it, and it's supposed to penetrate better. And the 2-blade really heavy design makes it really durable and makes it penetrate very well. My arrow is actually a gold tip Velocity XT, and the reason for that, it's a lightweight shaft but a very heavy arrow because all the weight is on the front here. It's a 300 spine, and I have them cut pretty short, and I have 100 grain inserts up here and 150 grain broadheads. Now what that does is it makes the FOC very high. The FOC on this arrow is a little over 24%, which is almost double what most arrows are today. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about FOC. Some people say it nosedives at long range, and a whole bunch of silly claims that are so not true. The higher FOC will actually make the arrow fly better because the fleshings have a longer steering arm, and what I really like it for is penetrating purposes. If you have an arrow that's really heavy throughout, it's still going to be better than a light arrow, but when the arrow hits the object, the deer or whatever, if you have a heavy backside, you're going to lose more energy as that arrow tries to whip around, and you're going to be losing more energy from just driving straight through. And with a high FOC, if the point is leading the way with all the weight, and you're just basically just dragging the back end, you're going to be losing a lot less energy from tail whip. And it's going to really make that arrow penetrate a lot better than, say, a low FOC arrow of the same weight. Another thing I like high FOC arrows for is that I feel like you don't need quite as durable of a shaft. Now, these gold tip Velocities are a very durable shaft, especially for the very low grains per inch. But if you have a lot of weight on the back end, trying to force the arrow through from the front, as opposed to the front of the arrow carrying the momentum and dragging the back end, it's going to be a lot less likely to have the arrow mushroom at the front or have it snap off at the front, which are usually the most critical parts of the arrow. I was really glad I had this arrow. Like I said, it's a really heavy 500 grains, and it's got a really strong 2-blade fixed head, so it really penetrates well, and I really needed that on the shot of my Halloween 8-point. While he was coming in, I thought he was going to be quartering to me at the shot, and for some reason I kind of kept that thought in my head, and the shot ended up being almost broadside, just a little quartering to me, but I put the pin right on the back edge of his front shoulder bone, just because I really thought he was quartering to me the whole time, and the shot ended up hitting right square in the shoulder joint in the really thick part of the bone. You know, you hear people talk about going through the shoulder scapula or the shoulder blade and talk about how there's great penetration. Well, the scapula and the shoulder blade is actually paper thin in most spots. That really isn't saying much to get through that. If you want to talk about the bone, I mean, it's a solid bone, and this arrow went through, split it, and I got a complete pass through. The arrow exited in the meaty part of the offside shoulder, taking out both lungs and a lot of major arteries, and got a complete pass through. Couldn't even find my arrow. It was buried in the grass somewhere, and the deer whirled and ran less than 50 yards and died. So awesome performance by this arrow. Another thing, blade retention, edge retention on your blades. If you have a broadhead that loses all of its edge retention when it hits the animal, going through ribs or hide or whatever, and it's not cutting to its maximum potential through the actual vitals, then you're losing a lot of the cutting surface that you have. So it's very important to have a broadhead with a strong edge retention and that really maintains its shape and is very strong. Now I've had like 3 or 4 years with this arrow, and I knew how well it penetrates, but I was not expecting it to do that well on a front shoulder joint shot. I thought of this scenario before. If a deer is coming in quartering to me, I still was not confident in going through the front shoulder joint, and I was going to do whatever I could to avoid that shot angle. And like I said, I was aiming in the meaty part of the shoulder. I wasn't trying to hit that joint. It's probably not a good idea to ever really aim for that joint. Bad things can happen when you do that. But I ended up missing my mark by 1 or 2 inches. I don't know. I didn't give myself that much room for error. I'm really glad I had this arrow to go through there and get a complete pass through, and the buck was down in seconds. But I did know that this arrow would perform well even if that shot did go south. I actually had an experience with a very similar arrow. I think it was just a little bit shorter. Basically the same spec, same broadhead. I shot an elk quartering to me, and I didn't realize the angle was this hard, and I put it right behind the front shoulder, and it actually went lengthwise through the elk, broke the back hip on the way out, and got a complete pass through. And that was when I was shooting only 56 pounds because of my first shoulder surgery. And so that was crazy. It went lengthwise through an elk, broke the back hip, severed the femoral artery, which made the elk die in less than 10 seconds, and then got a complete pass through. So that's 2 examples of this arrow really saving me from a bad shot and letting me recover my animal. Another thing which I talked about in the hunting video is what really affects penetration a lot is how well tuned your bow is. If that arrow is not flying perfectly straight, it kind of goes along with the high FOC, it's going to be causing the arrow to tail whip around, and you're going to be losing a lot of energy. So you really need to make sure your bow is very well tuned if you want to get the max out of it. And our Last Chance Archery tools really help us with that, and the Athens saws was easy to tune. So I think this is just about the perfect setup for that scenario, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like the video if you thought this was helpful, and subscribe to Bruck Outdoors.